Hi, and welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish, where we find out just what it takes to be a successful author and get your book out into the world and build the kinds of audience you're looking for your relevance. I want to direct you guys over, as usual, go over and take that Promote, Profit, Publish quiz. You can find it at www.promoteprofitpublishquiz.com and find out where your skill set lies. Do you have what it takes, and are you going in the right direction to achieve your goals? Today's guest, I've had the pleasure of talking to him for like the last hour, so I can imagine this is going to be humorous at best. He wants me to introduce him to you as my failed prom date, but I'm not going to do that. So when you hire Dan Clark as a keynote speaker, and by the way, he does have a budding career as a wedding aficionado. If this whole speaking gig thing doesn't work out for him, he has options. So when you hire Dan as your keynote, you get the CEO of an international high-performance communication and leadership development company. A New York Times bestselling author about, gosh, I don't even know how many times. He's a Hall of Fame speaker, a university professor, and an extreme adventurer. We're going to have to talk about that. I want to see just how extreme you are.
Yeah, it was like the first 3 dates we went on. It just completely blew my mind.
There you go. He's a gold record songwriter. Wait till you hear what he wrote. And an award-winning athlete. And 2012 Utah Father of the Year. How many kids do you have? Utah's a tricky place.
Yeah, I have 4 that I know of.
Only 4? How did you get Father of the Year when people here have 8 or 9 kids?
I had a less of a chance of screwing it up.
So he has become the modern day Napoleon Hill, having interviewed some of the world's most successful business gurus and champion athletes to share their secrets on what works and why. So I could go on and on. His bio is like 7 pages, but we discussed that we just didn't want to read his bio. And then
I changed my mind. Please keep going.
So Dan, welcome.
No big deal.
Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? No, I'm just kidding. We have an agenda.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so many people are asking about what it takes to train and become a paid speaker. And I heard you got a gig once, so you could share with us what that is.
Yeah. Just for the record, what I teach at the university level is public speaking, advanced public speaking. I've been doing that for 10 years. I've been a full-time professional speaker, paid speaker for 35 years, since 1982, when Zig Ziglar sponsored me in the National Speakers Association. And as I look back on my 35 plus year career, I gave so many speeches for free. And I asked my dad, and I honored him. I loved and respected him so much, and he was a great speaker, great orator, actually. As I got more and more speaking gigs, I asked him one day, how do I decide what kind of a speaker I should be? What kind of a speaker should I strive to become? What style? And he simply said, be the kind of speaker that you want to listen to. So that's why I became a storyteller. So the first question to anyone who cares or in the sound of our voices is, you got to figure out who you are and why you are. And it's like ordering an Uber ride. If you lie about where you are, the directions won't work. And so we have to be honestly considering the answer to that question. The second question is, why would you want to be a speaker? Why would anybody listen to you? Do you just think it's an adrenaline rush to stand on stage and manipulate the emotions of the audience so you can get a standing ovation and get a check and then leave? Is that what it's really about? And I would say, no, contraire mon frère. So, I've spoken in 71 countries, over 5,800 audiences, and I've been doing this for a long time, written 35 books. And it all came to a head when I was invited to be a professor at the university level, because it forced me to crystallize what I believe and what I've learned in all these years. So I can stop rambling and you can ask me a second question, Juliet. Let me just share with your listening audience, your viewers, what I call the 3 M's: message, market, and marketing. That's where you begin. And the first M, excuse me, message, is the answer to what would you drive 5 hours one way to say to somebody for free? And if you wouldn't do that, then you can't become a paid speaker, because you're going to have a flight that cancels and you're still going to have to make it. You're still going to have to rent a car or race through the airport and catch a different carrier. I've never missed a speech. I've never missed one speech, never a speech since 1982. That's 5,800 speeches, more than that.
Wow.
Never missed a speech, because I know that what I experienced in my life, playing football for 13 years, being paralyzed for 14 months, 16 doctors told me I wouldn't get better. When I started to get better, I was asked to speak. When I was in that stage in my life where I hit rock bottom, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because nobody ever hits rock bottom. But when I thought my life unraveled and everything that I knew to be true about myself was taken away, I lost my identity. I thought I was a football player, when in reality, that's just what I did. It's not who I am as a man. But when I was forced to fight through my pain, my broken heart, my shattered dreams, my loss of identity, and then recovered, I know for a fact, and I don't want to get emotional in the first 10 minutes of your podcast, Juliet, but I know for a fact in all of my experience that there's at least one man and one woman in every single one of my audiences, large or small. I've spoken to 80,000 people before, 45,000 people. You can go to my website and check out some pretty cool photographs. But I know that there's at least one man and one woman in every one of my audiences who is hurting as badly as I was, who just needs one more day. You know, one of my hit songs, "In 2 more days, tomorrow's yesterday." You got to hold on. And words and emotion matters. Knowledge is power, but knowledge has no heart. We don't learn to know, we learn to do. All the information in the world isn't going to make a person successful. It's like the guy who has 3 PhDs, one in philosophy, one in psychology, one in sociology. He doesn't have a job, but at least he can explain why. But the kicker is the understanding of reason leads to conclusions, but it is emotion that leads to action. So what would you drive 5 hours one way to say to somebody for free? And I gave so many free speeches back in the day as I perfected my craft as a storyteller and learned the power of emotion and well-placed words and turning verbs or nouns into action verbs. You don't run a company, you orchestrate a movement. And you learn to romance the language. And you have to figure out what your message is by answering, where are you right now? If you lie about where you are, the directions won't work. The second M is market. Who would benefit from your message? Teachers, educators, college students, sales professionals, financial advisors, folks who sell insurance, medical professionals, doctors. It does not matter. You just have to figure out who would benefit from this powerful, provocative, profound message. And that becomes your market. The third M is marketing. Where do these people gather? Do they gather at university campuses? Do they gather in schools? Are they educators? Do they gather in churches or synagogues? Are they sales professionals? Are they at $1 Million Round Table? American Medical Association? Is it the American Bankers Association? Are they association executives? Talk about a perfect place to plant your seeds in the Society of Association Executives. Once you answer where they meet, that's your marketing. So now you have the 3 M's. And in that process, you've actually internally excavated whether or not you are called to be a speaker, because the world doesn't need a bunch of just renegade folks who are different off stage than they are on stage. That's one of the things I love about you, Juliet. You're exactly the same on stage as you are off stage. You're exactly the same in a lashing rainstorm while you and I are weathering the storm of a dear friend's wedding, and the same indoors once our clothes are sopping wet and we're trying to dry out so we can actually reconvene the wedding. And the same in your studio, and the same at a dinner that we've shared many times. So that's the secret to being a speaker. That's the secret. You got to figure out if this is your calling. And if it's not, go buy a 7-Eleven.
True.
Do something different. If this is not your gig, don't force it. I want to be a speaker. Everybody and their dog tells me, I want to be a speaker. I want to be a speaker. And I'm like, well, you know what? In fact, let me just get this off my chest. There are so many marketing companies right now who say, I will teach you how to win stages.
Right.
I can get you on platforms. I can actually make you and help you become a paid speaker. And I'm like, they're missing the boat. You got to first figure out what your message is and why somebody should listen to you. And if it's a calling, and if it's not, I'm sorry, go sell washing machines. No offense.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people out there who are hanging the speaker coach shingle. I personally have met one who took $1,000 course, a downloadable evergreen course, and decided he was a speaking coach. And it's kind of wild, actually, but that's what people do. So that's good advice.
So many of them. So if your listeners and viewers are enticed to sign up for a speaker's boot camp or training, I would encourage them to check mine out first, but ask the question, what is the credibility of the speaker?
Mm-hmm.
There's guys in Vegas who charge big bucks. They'll teach you how to win stages and how to get on stages, and they never have done it.
Right.
I know they've never done it. I'm like, really? So don't get me started there. I'll have to,
No shenanigans on the show. But you bring up a great point, because I see so many people, you do have to have a skill, but you have to have a sustainable business model behind you too, for that credibility. And I see so many people going into the world right now who, I'm a coach and I'm struggling and I'm doing this because somebody told me this is the next magic bullet I have to overcome. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I know there's meaning in your madness in inviting me on your podcast, because your reputation precedes you.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's so good, Juliet. And your system of capturing data and sustaining the connectability, the connection to those who have actually interacted with you is so critical. And that's the back end. I mean, what we always say is it doesn't do you any good to get on Larry King if you don't have a book in the bookstore. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at it as a business if you want to be a paid speaker. If it's your passion to be a speaker, you can be a great storyteller, but you're going to starve to death.
Right.
So you also have to put a value on your message. Can you actually change someone's life? If one of your teenagers was contemplating suicide and I came into your school, I was the guy in the Nancy Reagan White House who took Mrs. Reagan's Just Say No program to all 50 states. So between 1983 and 1989, I spoke at 3 schools, 3 high schools every day, 15 a week for 140 school days a year out of the 180. Between 1983 and 1989, so I spoke, do the math, every school averaged about 2,500 to 3,000 students. So I spoke to over 5.5 or so million teenagers in all 50 states and all 10 provinces of Canada. And my sweet mother's still alive, 90 years of age, and she, for some reason, saved hundreds and hundreds of letters that I received back in the day. And when I go to visit her, she always wants to pull out 3 or 4 and cry, reading them to me, that my son was going to kill himself and he decided not to because he heard your motivational assembly. I was in your audience and I was going to take my life, but I decided not to. And as a parent, you wonder, what's that worth? If you and I went out on a date to a movie and dinner, I mean, that's $60, $70 if we just get cheap, sushi and a good movie. And if you have $60 per person in a room full of 3,000 people, and you figure out your speaker's honorarium could be about that. I don't want anybody listening to do the math, but if you believe that your message could save lives, if you believe that your message could actually take someone to the next level, if you believe that your message could help someone, escape a horrible relationship, or stay in a marriage and make it work, or become a better parent, or, an abusive woman, an abused woman getting out of that situation, whatever the case may be, if your message is so profound and provocative that you can actually help someone better themselves, why not get paid for it if you're making a difference first? So you have to have the back end, you have to have the structure, you have to have the follow-up. If you want to be a paid speaker, 73% of my business is always returned because people know I'm a storyteller and I have so much more material to share than I just had time to share. But it's like a blind date. You and I were laughing as I was driving in my car getting ready for this Zoom call. And, those of you listening who are single, none of us ever want a blind date. That's the worst experience on the planet. And most of the time they don't work out. But let's just say it works out famously and you want a second date and you want a third date and it leads to love. Well, if we as speakers go into that audience as a blind date, we're referred and they check us out and they think it's going to be a perfect fit. And then we have this amazing connection, not just with the meeting event planner, but with the audience. And that's what I teach in my public speaking seminars and my coaching is that seek to bless, not impress. If people leave our audiences impressed with us, then we blew it. But if they leave impressed with themselves and empowered to do more, and they believe how I raised my children, the only person you need to be better than is the person you were yesterday, and they leave better than they were when they arrived, saying, I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again. I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again. There's no need for another blind date. We've connected, so now come with another program, come with more. I gave you a couple of pieces of me and I have so many more that I'd love to share. And because you have the relationship, now manage the relationship. Mm-hmm. The definition of sales is the transference of trust. And once we've had that transference of trust, we can talk about anything, about any product, service, any pain, and turn it into pleasure. We really can help people take it to the next level if they trust us. And so why not figure out a way to make sure that that connection is sustainable through your product and service? Let me plug it. I mean, you and I would be the perfect match. We are the perfect match in the sense that I can stand on a stage, so can you, but because I've been doing this professionally for so long, and then you come in and give me, you sell me your product and service that allows me to keep this connection alive. Magic, made in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. That's great advice too. I loved what you said earlier about that alignment piece too. How many times, I don't know about you, I've seen it twice now, where someone gets on stage, they give this great talk, and then they've got a hot mic. They're getting off the stage saying, get these people away from me, or some version of that.
Yeah.
How does that impact an audience when they actually see that out of alignment? Do you think that erodes that trust in that person?
Oh, obvious. But here's the kicker, Juliet. It ruins all the rest of us who follow. If someone violates our trust, we don't feel bad because they made us angry. We don't feel bad because they violated their part of the agreement. We feel bad because we can't trust them again. Mm-hmm. So as professional speakers, we owe it to one another to rise to the occasion and connect with our audience. And be that, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent person that we projected on stage when we're off stage. I've had so many literal spiritual experiences where I'll be on stage and we're laughing really hard and we're crying and I'm telling all my chicken soup for the soul stories and I share my story about being paralyzed. This happened to me in Iowa just a short time ago, and this lovely couple came up to me afterwards, and they said, I don't know what time your flight leaves, but we have this kid in our school district who was paralyzed playing football, and blah blah blah, and it was like 8:30 at night or 9 o'clock at night. Obviously, my flight wasn't going to leave until in the morning. And they said, is there any way that we could get you to talk to this kid? Because he's losing hope and he's paralyzed and he just needs, a light at the tunnel, a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm not, I can't believe I'm actually, this seems so self-serving, Juliet. Hopefully your people know that it's not about me. I said, okay. So we drove for 2 hours out in the middle of nowhere, went into this house that was modified so that a wheelchair could go in and out of the rooms. Here's this kid in his bed, paralyzed from a football accident. And to be able to make him laugh and to give him some hope and spend 45 minutes with him, and then turn around and drive back to my hotel. That's what being a public speaker is about. You're called. You're supposed to be making a difference. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be able to take anyone at any time for any reason to the next level, not just whip off a Shakespearean memorized quoted speech. And I'm a storyteller, and I have a modular kind of a mutual fund approach to speaking where I think you should, my whole system, create stories, and every story needs to be funny and provocative with the quote and emotional so they remember it. And once you polish that story, then you move on to the next story and you move on to the next story. And if you're playing golf, you go out on a golf course with a golf bag that carries 14 clubs, which means no matter where your ball sits on the golf course, it could be out in the middle of the fairway in perfect condition. It could be in the weeds. It could be in the sand. It doesn't matter. You can select from your bag the appropriate golf club, one of the 14 clubs that will allow you to hit that golf ball wherever you need to hit it in that moment. So when I prepare my speeches, and you should spend more time preparing yourself to speak than you do speaking or preparing a speech, which means you're always wanting to interview the next person. You're always wanting that extreme adventure. I've flown all the fighter jets in the Air Force, all the bombers. I've taken off and landed on an aircraft carrier. I flew with the Air Force Thunderbirds. I went up into space. Your listeners, your viewers need to Google it on YouTube. Go to YouTube, Dan Clark U2 Spy Plane. There's a 15-minute documentary of me up into space. You will crack up. I think I have like 85,000 views just in the last little while. So you're always trying to check off your bucket list to interview cool people like you, get more stories, and then learn the life lesson that you learned from going up into space, looking at the curvature of the earth, gazing in the endless blackness of the universe for 5 hours. That's got to teach you something. Mm-hmm. So you quantify your messages, you tell the story, you isolate the story and say, okay, what's the life lessons that I learned? Then you make it funny, provocative, and emotional. You polish it and practice it. Then you move on to the next story. Then you move on to the next story. And suddenly you have all these polished stories, which are the nucleus of writing a book, which you can whip out. I help people write books in 45 days, have it published in hand, because we are storytellers, because we've illustrated their life lessons way before we say, okay, what's the chapter? What's the lesson? What's the title? Everybody goes, I want to write a book and I have 2 titles. I'm like, that's backwards. You never do that.
Right.
You figure out what your message is. What are you going to teach the world? Then you reverse engineer and figure out, okay, what's the lesson? If you're not really good at dating and love, maybe the title of the book is Had I Shot You When I Met You, I'd Be Out of Jail by Now. Maybe if you're now an expert in divorce, maybe the title of your book is How Can I Miss You If You Won't Go Away? If someone follows you to Salt Lake City or something like that,
Yeah. So it's funny you said that. I actually had someone that called me a while back who said they were a relationship expert. And I said they wanted to write a book. And I was like, what makes you a relationship expert? She explained she'd been divorced 4 times now. And I was like, I think you've got this backwards. That makes you a divorce expert, not a relationship expert.
Yeah, and she could write murder mysteries, maybe. Come on.
Wait a minute. No. That takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. Does your dog want to join us?
No. I'm getting him out of here. Sorry, come here.
That's okay.
His name's come here, Harley. His name's Harley Davidson.
Come on, Harley Davidson. Do you have a Harley? Is that part of your adventure tour?
That's very funny. Can you see me walking around my house?
Yes,
Sorry.
You guys all know where Dan, I'll tell you where Dan lives. So, if you want
to. I've got some cool stuff. Every fighter jet, every bomber, I've always gotten a model from the Air Force to the Navy, and kind of cool. So I'm back settled with a dog that's not quiet. Thank you so much.
No, that's okay. So for those of you who want to know where Dan lives, there's this map online. It's called the Judgmental Salt Lake City Map, and he lives with the 1%.
That's all I need. Yeah.
So, Dan, you have some things coming up. You want to share with us about some boot camps and how we can get a hold of you and work with you and really figure out what it is we need in this whole speaking realm.
Yeah, I firmly believe everybody has a book inside of them. I believe everybody's story is as compelling as your story, Juliet, and as my story. And I've read one book a week for the last 16 and a half years. I'm really proud of that. This is my library. I've read every book that you see in this library over the years. I built my dream house back in 1989 of this beautiful cherry wood. I just love my library. And of all the books I've read, my favorite book is my dad's personal history. So he was diagnosed with cancer, given 6 months to live. And because of our relationship, I said, come on, I got the video camera back in the day, the one that you hold on your shoulder and carry the little suitcase around. And we went into where he grew up and went to the one-room schoolhouse and, his farm life and blah, blah, blah. And it was incredible. And to have him document his life was so extraordinary. And then we published it before he passed away. And that's just such an important part of life. Living here in Utah, where family history and genealogy is just part of the culture, we have a giant convention, an international convention every year called Roots Tech that draws 10 to 20,000 people from all walks of life from every country you can imagine. And they learn about how to do genealogical research on their family tree, on their family history. Where do their roots, who was their great, great, great grandfather and blah, blah, blah. And Donny Osmond, he called me and he was asked to be the keynote speaker. And he asked me to help him write his speech. I said, okay. So he and I got together in his beautiful home and he started asking questions. And he goes, what's the most important question to answer, Dan? I'm like, everybody's going to wonder why they asked Donny Osmond to speak at a family history conference when you're an entertainer, when you're a singer. And he goes, that's kind of dawned on me too. So the way he started his speech was, for all of you who even care, let me just get singing Puppy Love out of the way. So he sang about 30 seconds and had the women swoon. And then he said, let me just show you a little clip of growing up. And he showed video of him growing up, and he was on the Andy Williams show when he was 4 years old.
Wow.
And when the video clip and montage collage is through, he says to the audience, my life has been documented since I was 4 years old. Has yours? Why not? Is my life more interesting and more provocative and more important than your life? Especially your children, your grandchildren, and their children and grandchildren? No. So family history is about stories. It's about oral history. It's about sharing what you've learned and the experiences you've had with your family. So because of that, I want to help everybody on the planet write their personal history book. But the process is to help them write a speech. Because once you write the speech and you've polished and perfected and mastered each one of these stories and made every one of them funny, provocative, and emotional, suddenly you have this bag of 14 golf clubs. You have this bag of all these polished stories, and what are you going to do with them? Well, the way you get them focused is to say, okay, what's your last lecture? So my final examination in every one of my public speaking classes for the last 10 years has always been the last lecture, taking it from Professor Pausch. And they're given 4 to 7 minutes. If you had 1 hour to live, what would you say to the world? Well, you ask that to someone in one of my speaker boot camps, and once they figure out what their message is, what's their last lecture, then we go to the pool, the menu, the suite of stories that we've already polished and perfected, and we say, okay, these 3 stories with their life lessons will illustrate my last lecture, and that becomes the last and final chapter of the book. Because every song has to end in a crescendo. You got to have, this is what you picked up my book to read about. And then you reverse engineer and you say, okay, what steps of my life did I go through that led me to this last lecture? And they become your subjects of they become your chapter titles. When I sold my last book to Penguin Random House, The Art of Significance, Achieving the Level Beyond Success, the publisher Adrian Zackheim he said one of the reasons why they gave me this huge 6-figure advance and a great bonus was because of the compelling chapter titles that made him want to turn the book, open it, flip through the pages. So now you have all the steps that you went through to get to your last lecture, the final chapter of the book. You have compelling titles. And now you again go back to your suite, your menu, your bag of stories, and you say, okay, here's chapter 1. From my story collection, what stories should I use to illustrate chapter 1? Well, I'm going to use these 2. Chapter 2, I'm going to use these 3. Chapter 3, whoa, I'm only going to use one story because it's so provocative. And suddenly you have this book, and now you go and collectively turn it into an editor who edits so every word pays its own way. Learned that in Nashville as a hit songwriter. Mm-hmm. You get the right editor to edit so every word pays its own way. You replace the nouns and the verbs with action verbs like we talked about moments ago. And that turns it into a literary masterpiece because the editor will eliminate all the redundancy. You know, we're all basic Baptist ministers at heart. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So a good editor eliminates all that redundancy, makes it grammatically correct so you can get a great, review from Publishers Weekly and people who really know about literature. And then you go through the proper steps of a book cover, design, blah, blah, blah. And I've helped people get their books published within 35 to 45 days, signed, sealed, and delivered. While we've written a compelling, entertaining, funny, provocative, emotional keynote speech that they now can go out and sell as a paid speaker to recoup the money that they just invested in my speaker bootcamp. So yeah, that's a long answer to your simple question, but I have speaker boot camps. I don't have the next one on date right now to share with your podcasting audience. But if you could email me at dan@danclark.com. Again, Dan, D-A-N, at DANCLARK.com, dan@danclark.com. And all you have to do in your email is just say, I'm interested in Dan's next speaker boot camp. Then my office will obviously let you know where it is. I live in Utah. I've had several boot camps here in Utah, but I'm in the mood now to take it on the road. I've had such response. So maybe I'll come to where you are. And the price point is worth every bit that you'll invest in yourself because you're going to learn about you, what your message is, what you're passionate about. I'm going to release and trigger passion, creativity, and imagination. You're going to have a keynote speech. You're going to understand the mechanics, the motivated sequence, the order in which you put the stories and jokes and quotes matters. And blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about the brain chemicals. I really get into depth, but we're going to laugh along the way. We're going to cry. We're going to share storytelling techniques. And then in the process, you can package yourself and go get a couple of speaking gigs to pay for your investment in this speaker boot camp. And then the rest is gravy train because you're making a difference, not just a living.
That is so awesome.
Speaker boot camp is something I'm passionate about. And if I could give your listeners, your viewers, a free book, is that okay? I want them to download.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so pull out your phone, pull out your Android, your Samsung, or your Apple phone. And, you're going to send out a brand new message. So when that screen comes up, you need to enter in the number 801-980-9291. Repeat, enter in the phone number 801-980-9291. And then in the window below, enter in the word, I'll give you away the team building book. So enter in the word team, T-E-A-M. Actually, no, I lied. Enter in the word L-E-A-D. Let me give you my free leadership book. You'll have some great stories, laughs, and cries. So again, 801-980-9291. Enter in the word lead, L-E-A-D. And then when you push send, you're going to get a new screen up that will give you a link. And as you enter in your name and your email address in that link, in the next 60 minutes, you'll get a free download of my book, Lead, and that might give you an opportunity to know how to access my speaker bootcamp or my speaker training that I've recorded that's available online at your listening and viewing pleasure.
Yay. Thank you so much for giving that to all my listeners. I appreciate it. Anything else we didn't cover that they must know?
Yeah. My favorite world, Juliet, is the world of music. And I think because of who you are and the listeners that you would obviously attract, now that I'm getting to know you better and better, and we've connected at so many levels, you're just such a great human being. You really are. I love you to death. I think what you remind me to say, my dear friend, is that we don't, because I've been involved with Chicken Soup for the Soul since day one, way back in 1993, and I'm the primary contributing author to all the books. For the record, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor, they never wrote any story. So, because I'm a primary contributing author, they often told a lot of my stories. Mine are some of the most famous stories in all of Chicken Soup. Puppies for Sale, it was made into a film at Paramount Studios, starring Jack Lemmon. Anyway, because of my involvement with Chicken Soup, so many people, they want to know about the law of attraction that Bob Proctor illuminated in The Secret. And he sometimes makes it so mystical. What I want people to remember is that we don't attract who we want, we attract who we are.
Oh, yes.
We attract what we believe we deserve in friendship. We connect even on the internet. We connect. And because of that, we have to couple that with another statement that I've made for 1,000 years, that we become the average of the 5 people we associate with the most. If you hang around with 5 broke people, you're going to become the 6th. If you hang around with 5 negative, whining people, you're going to become the 6th. But if you believe as we believe, you must be willing to pay any price and travel any distance to associate with extraordinary human beings. That's what makes us the people we are, and that's what your podcast can do to elevate everyone else who listens, so that they leave us saying, I like me best when I'm with you. I want to see you again. Which begs the last question that I want to leave your listeners with. If we must be willing to pay any price and travel any distance to associate with extraordinary human beings, the question is, what's an extraordinary human being? It's someone who triggers more passion, creativity, and imagination. The answers are in the box. We don't have to think outside the lines. Everything required of us to take ourselves to the next level is already inside of us if we just hang around with the right people. And we understand what real love is, and service before self is our mantra. And so in the world of music, that's the best place to illuminate the significance of passion, creativity, and imagination, because most people don't realize that in music, there are only 12 notes. When I ask my audiences, how many of you are musicians, how many notes are there in music, most people count the major notes like we all do in life, the big things. Don't sweat the small stuff. So we say there's 7 notes in music: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, contraire mon frère. In the year 1685, a very famous music composer in Western Europe decides he wants more options. He's the guy that put the black keys on the piano. So if you look at the 88 keys on a keyboard, there are 7 white notes and there are 5 black notes, a total of 12 notes in music. And those 12 notes repeat themselves every 12 notes, which is what we call an octave. And the difference between one song and another song, the only difference between one song and another song, is the order in which those 12 notes fall and the timing and spacing in between the notes. So here's the question of the day. What's the difference between a hit songwriter and a lousy songwriter? They have access to the same 12 notes. What's the difference between a great banker and a lousy banker? They have access to the same economy, the same interest rates. What's the difference between a great podcaster and an extraordinary podcaster like you? What's the difference between a great dad or mom, great spouse, great significant other, and somebody average who just takes our love for granted? What's the difference? The answer in any relationship in our lives, the difference between a hit songwriter and a lousy songwriter is passion, creativity, and imagination. Mm-hmm. It's how you arrange those 12 notes every single day, not living off of your past hits, but writing a brand new hit song every day simply because you can. And a hit song always makes you want to either make love or want to dance. If it's a message song, it might make the top 40. But if you want a number 1 song, it has to make you either want to make love or want to dance. And those are both connective activities where, having a whole conversation without even holding, having a whole conversation just by holding my hand. Where, happily ever after is a day at a time proposition, always making sure that you're the last one to let go. We can go on and romance the language, but that's the reason why people would tune into your podcast. That's the reason why you and I are friends. I can't speak for you, but you trigger passion, creativity, and imagination in everyone with whom you you hang at a table laughing at a wedding while we're getting rained out. It doesn't matter. So I love you. I honor you. Thanks for having me on your show. And I hope we can do it again. I have stories I want to tell. I didn't really tell any stories, so you're going to have me back because I take pride in being Mother Goose.
Okay, so we'll do a second podcast soon about storytelling. How's that?
Oh, I love that. And maybe the use of humor. Come on.
Some humor. Well, neither of us are very humorous people. I don't know if that would work.
Laugh so hard. You are one funny woman. Hello.
You're pretty funny too. So
you're a very funny man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with us.
And I'm going to have you on my radio show, voiceamerica.com, the Influencers channel, because you are one of the more extraordinary people I've ever met.
Thank you. I didn't even know you had a radio show. Oh, yeah. I'm a bad host, huh?
No. That's okay. Maybe we should have talked about, some of my better, more well-known songs, like My Wife Ran Off With My Best Friend and I'm Going to Miss Him Dearly.
I love that title, actually, because your best friend is way more important than your spouse. especially if you're me, right?
I know, you were so funny.
All right. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Juliet. Thanks. God bless.